Hello everyone, and welcome back to another R tutorial video. And in this video, I want to walk through moving the legend around in tmap. And so if you remember from our previous video on legends, we will have left off with this construction right here, which made a 3-layer legend, and it sort of defaulted itself down into the lower left-hand corner. And in this particular case, the lower left-hand corner actually works pretty well. But let's say that maybe you wanted to move it somewhere else. Maybe you wanted to put it in the upper left. Maybe you wanted to move it somewhere. Maybe you wanted it outside of this this map entirely. Maybe you wanted it, say, out here, for example. tmap actually makes that pretty straightforward. But what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to include one more function in our repertoire, and that's called tmLegend. So what I've done down here in the console is I've actually typed in the help function for tmLegend so that we can use RStudio's built-in help documentation just to quickly see what tmLegend gives us. And I want to point something out while we're in here. So tmLegend is actually a shortcut into a function called tmLayout. Now, tmLayout could honestly have its own entire video series, just because of all of the different parameters that it has and the level of fine scale control it gives you over nitpicky things with your map. And most of these are well outside of what we're ever going to talk about. But the main thing that I want to do is I want to talk about the legend parameters, which are sort of indicated by the legend dot. And by using tmLegend instead of tmLayout, tmLegend gives us a shortcut so that we're only dealing with these legend parameters. We don't have to worry about any of the other ones. And in specific, what I want to talk about in this video are the 3 parameters that are kind of by my cursor right here. And that's legend.outside, or when we put in, it's going to be outside. Legend.outside.position, or outside.position, and then legend.position, or just position. And these 3 are going to control where the legend shows up relative to the map. And I think we're going to go through an example and sort of show what this means. So the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about that legend.outside, or when we type it in, you're just going to see outside because we're using tmLegend. So the first thing we need to do is at the very end of our map, so after we've set up everything, after we've made the data look the way we want, after we've got all the legends added, we're going to add one last function called tmLegend. Again, make sure you have a plus sign at the end here. So tmLegend takes in any of the parameters you see here minus the legend dot. So the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about outside. So outside is a Boolean, so it's either true or it's false, and it defaults to false. And what outside does, let me just set it to true, and then I'm going to run that in just a second. So by default, outside equals false, which means that the legend is going to be placed inside the bounding box of the map document. So you can see this sort of black line here. With outside equal false, the legend will always be placed inside of this square here. If we set outside equal to true, it will now be placed outside of the bounding box. So let's go ahead and go back up here. Let's rerun map advanced. Let's rerun that. It'll take just a second, and you'll see already that it's sort of moved and it's now outside of the bounding box. So hopefully that makes sense. That's what outside does. By default, it's false, which means the legend will be inside the bounding box. If you set outside equal to true, it will move it outside of the bounding box. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to delete this. So now by default, it will be inside the bounding box. And I want to talk about position. So position takes in 2 parameters. So a C. It takes in 2 parameters. And these parameters control the vertical and the horizontal position of the legend. So the way this will work is the first position controls left and right, and you have basically left, middle, and right. And then the second parameter controls the vertical position, and you have top, middle, and bottom. And this is relative to the map frame. So for example, right now it is in the right top, and that puts it up here. If we wanted to move it to this other side over here, we would do something like this. We'd do something like left, comma, top. And if we run that code and we run that, you'll see that because, this is actually a good point, because we didn't have outside equals true, it defaulted back to inside the box and it put it in the upper left hand corner. So you can see how by left and top it put it there. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's go ahead and let's put it in the bottom right. So we would do right and bottom. And you'll see that it has put it down here instead. So let's say that maybe you actually like it being outside of the map document or outside of the map frame. We can do that. We have to tweak a couple parameters. First of all, we have to set that outside equal to true. And this is the one that makes me a little sad, is that there's actually a separate parameter for positioning outside, and that's that outside dot position. And if we wanted to put this in the upper left, we would do, again, we would do left first because it's the horizontal and then the vertical. And then we need to close out our function. We also need a comma here. There we go. That should take care of our syntax errors. And if we run this, hopefully we don't crash. And then if we run this again, you'll see that we've done that, that we've actually put the legend in the upper left corner of the map. So hopefully that makes sense. I know there's some gaps and some white space in here, and that would definitely be something you'd want to dig through and mess with some of the parameters, some of the other parameters that we're not going to talk about. But in terms of just moving the legend around, that's how you'd go about doing it. So hopefully that made sense. Hopefully you understand the difference between outside equals true and outside equals false. And hopefully you understand the way that the position and outside position work. If any of this was confusing, I encourage you to pause the video, go back, rewatch the parts you're confused about. And as always, please reach out. Thank you.